Before we get into this, let me just preference by saying that it doesn't matter which game you think is better than the other. It really doesn't. Hell, maybe you even fall in the category of I like both games equally. It really doesn't matter. This isn't some official which one is better video. It's just an opinion. And at the end of the day, I think both games have something to offer. But only one can be the winner. We have to pick one, and I'm gonna pick one by the end of the video. It's a thing I've argued with myself quite a lot. Sometimes I'm feeling the second one, sometimes it's always the first one, you know. And I never always liked The Evil Within. It's not a franchise where I started playing the first game and all of a sudden I was in love with it. I actually couldn't stand my time with it because of the jankiness, the unfairness of the combat. There was a lot of just... It really rubbed me the wrong way. I played it a year later and it was like a religious experience. It was like something clicked with that game and it felt perfect. The same thing happened with 2. 2 came out, played it. Wasn't the biggest fan in the change of direction. Revisited it and it grew on me. It really did, to the point of where I was like, you know what? Maybe I do like it more than the first one. I kind of wrestle with this a lot, so I wanted to make this video because I'm gonna officially say which one I think's the best and use this video as a way to be like, that's the one that I claim. So, we're gonna compare a few categories when it comes to Evil Within because both games are different in a lot of ways, but both games are also pretty similar in a lot of ways. So, some things can be compared and others are just so different. Evil Within's weird, right? Because the first game has this vibe about it. It's like, it's really janky. It's very linear. It's the hardcore horror fans video game, if you will. That's the way I like to look at it. While Evil Within 2 is more open zone. It's a bit less linear. It's not as hardcore with the horror visuals. It's not, and it's the kind of game where, because it's so fair in its combat and its gameplay, sure, it's not perfect, I feel like I can recommend it to a lot of people while I can't recommend that first game to people. It's just the way I sit with these games. But going off a story standpoint, both games offer something different, and while the sequel can suffer because it's a sequel, a lot of the mystery kind of gets like flung out the window, right? With that first game, we didn't know what was real, what was fake, what the hell was going on half the time. By the time you get to the end, you can fill in the blanks. Sure, none of it made any sense. If you really sit down and try to figure out The Evil Within, you're going to give yourself a headache. It just isn't going to work out. But with Evil Within 2, things make way more sense, but all the mystery's gone. There's plot holes here and there, but if you want a more personalized story, you're going to go with Evil Within 2. If you want a mystery where you're not even sure what's real, what the hell's going on, it's Evil Within 1. And personally, I like the ambiguous storytelling of that first game. I like the idea that it doesn't really explain everything very well. So a lot of it is up for interpretation. And sure, it doesn't make sense, but it's like, it doesn't make sense in a fun way, you know? It works for what The Evil Within is. Voice actors got changed across the board with a sequel too. Now this is going to be, again, something where it's going to be preference. Evil Within 1 is very much, although he's not a mute, he very rarely talks. Seb just doesn't say anything. While in Evil Within 2, he just doesn't shut up. He's constantly talking all the time. So this is going to be kind of like, do you like Dead Space 1? Do you like Dead Space 2? Do you like him without the voice? Do you like him with the voice? It's very much in that kind of category. Evil Within 1, obviously he doesn't say too much, but when he does talk, it sounds good. With Evil Within 2, it's a little bit hit and miss. It's not perfect all the time, but it does grow on you. And that version of Seb does just chat a lot. And you know, it really depends on what kind of mood I'm in when it comes to these games. Do I want them to shut up? Do I want them to talk? You know, it just really depends on what I want from these games. When it comes to aesthetic, Evil Within 1 has this very early 2000s horror movie aesthetic where it's like, it's really gritty, it's grim, everything's covered in blood and rust, and it's just disgusting from start to finish. It is, and I absolutely love the environments, what it has to offer, where it puts you. Where the Evil Within 2 gives you a lot of freedom in its exploration, finding upgrades, and I really do love that, and lets you do like side missions, so you might even miss some things going through. It adds in side missions that are some of the scarier side missions you'll come across in video games. The anima side quest with the ghost lady, that shit is great, especially on a PlayStation controller when she's talking through the controller. That thing is really well designed. But from a visual standpoint, Evil Within 2 drops the ball a little bit for me. It doesn't have the aesthetic of that first game. Nothing's covered in blood. Nothing's covered in rust. It doesn't look gritty. It doesn't look disgusting. It just looks sterilized. And it might work for some people. It looks like a Stephen King movie, if you will. Every Town USA. It doesn't work for me personally. I want that gritty, disgusting visual style from the first game. I do. And if we do get a third one, I really hope they go back to the way one is. Or maybe blend the two together, because there's just not enough environments in Evil Within 2 where I'm in it and I'm like, damn, this is disgusting, and this is why I play horror games. Gameplay, this is where both games are kind of similar, right? They're an over-the-shoulder action horror style shooter. They do things very similar, but where they differ is Evil Within 2 falls into the category of trying to be like every other game. It doesn't bring anything new to the table. It got rid of any uniqueness that first game had and just kind of flung generic stuff at us. Instead of dropping a match to light up the zombies, the haunted, the lost, or whatever you want to call them, this time it just lets you do a generic head stomp on any enemy that's fallen to the ground. And sure, it is satisfying to do. It's just a little generic, man. It's just kind of like, what happened to the match? The match mechanic made no sense at all. But it worked for what it was. It was like this really unique system where I know some people think the match mechanic was like Resident Evil 1 Remake, where it was like burn the zombies before they get up and turn into Crimson Heads. That's not what this is. This is like its own mechanic. You can knock a zombie down, haunted, whatever you want to call the enemy, and then when enemies are coming towards it, you can light that one up on fire even though it's not dead, and then it just chain reacts and sets them all on fire. And it makes sense for the story because you're inside the killer's mind, and that killer's mind was traumatized by fire, right? It works for the game. Things like Isaac's torch, how he lights environments up. In the original, he's got a lamp. In the sequel, he's just got a hip torch. And like, how many video games have we got at this point with just the generic flashlight? It's like, come on now, where's the uniqueness? I feel like we just really sterilized any kind of design that the Evil Within had, going from a lamp to a flashlight. And then on top of that, the weapon choices. Evil Within 1 has arguably perfect weapon selection for survival horror. They're single shot weapons, like revolvers that are hard to reload. Your pump action shotgun, I really wish that was a double barrel. Yes, you can get a double barrel, but it was DLC only. I do have it, I just don't like to use it for whatever reason. I feel like that should have been the main shotgun choice, to be honest. 2 shots, you're done, you have to reload. It works so well. The crossbow, and then the bolt action sniper rifle. Then you go into the sequel, and Seb's carrying a 45, so it's just like drop the clip, put a new clip in. It's very generic reloads. Shotgun's very similar, obviously, but then even the sniper rifle, it's a clip instead of bolt action, and obviously he's got the crossbow, which I would argue just doesn't work as well, man. I don't know what it is. I think the choices in the crossbow just aren't as fun to use. They're not. Some of them are very similar and some of them work exactly the same, so you can't 100% knock it. It's just one of those things where it's like I prefer what they did in the original. Any kind of automatic weapons you get in the original were done through unlocks by getting all collectibles or beating it on harder difficulties and whatnot, getting the machine gun. While in Evil Within 2, you will get a fully automatic machine gun by like 2/3 of the way in, and it's just kind of like, really? Why have we got so much weaponry? Evil Within 2 doesn't commit the sin of giving the enemies guns, though. You've got to give that to Evil Within 2 and never overstep the line. While Evil Within 1 does, it'll give enemies near the end of the game machine guns, and it's just like, why are we doing this? I thought we learned our lesson from Resident Evil 5 and 6. Do not do this. This is not a good idea. It never was a good idea to give any enemies in horror games machine guns. So you've got to give that Evil Within 2 for being smart with that. Boss designs, they're better in the original. Enemy designs, they're better in the original. Boss encounters are better in the original. But Evil Within 2 has a far superior end boss. While Evil Within 1 has a very on-rails end boss with Ruvik. Ruvik is a much better character than Myra. Myra's end boss is an actual boss battle. It has things you need to learn, patterns you have to avoid, attacks you have to avoid, patterns to learn. And it just works better as a boss encounter. Evil Within 1 is very much just run here, run there, on rails do this, on rails do that. But it can be forgiven because the encounters before this were better, far superior. Evil Within 2 does have the iconic meet Ruvik, meet Laura again, and that boss fight is absolutely superb and is one of the standout moments in the Evil Within 2. However, you could also make the argument that it says a lot about the game when the standout moment from that sequel is nostalgia bait from the first game. So with all that being said, I think it's time we end this video and we pick a winner. And if you can't tell by the way I'm talking about it, Evil Within 1 is the superior game. That's the game I pick out the two. That doesn't mean I don't like Evil Within 2. I think both games have something to offer, and I believe you should play both and make your own decision. But I think Evil Within 1 is the hardcore horror fans video game. It has a better setting. It's way grittier and disgusting. I love the design of the game. Yes, it's janky. Yes, it's unfair. But it's Evil Within, and it's just the way it should be. Now, if we could get a remaster, you know, like, let's get some 4K, 60 FPS on console, with some bug fixes, some updates, like, you know, like when when Seb gets knocked down to the ground, he pulls out a 45 to do those moments. Can we sort that out, please? Why has he got a 45 and not his revolver? Stuff like that, I would love to see a remaster. Just fix all the little bugs here and there of Evil Within and really make it a perfect video game. It's top notch. I think you should play the Evil Within 2 as well, though. I really do like that game too. But anyway, that's enough of me rambling. Which Evil Within do you prefer? Let me know down below. Make your argument. If you're new here, subscribe. But yeah, people, that's all I got. I'll catch you later.